No, perfect. Thanks. We have some new people in the market center. Michael's going to be joining us, and he'll be here in person. He's actually relocating from Idaho. He will be training to be one of the managing broker. So helping basically kind of an in-office BIC. He comes with a wealth of experience, and I think he finished law school not too long ago too. So he comes with a good, abundant knowledge of contract law and that sort of thing, which would be helpful. So you see these people around, please welcome them. Bonnie has joined us. Teresa has joined us. Sonia is on this call. Welcome, Sonia. Melinda has joined us. Yoko, Shingo. These are our top producers this month. So if you see them around, congratulate them on their hard work and efforts. Family reunions around the corner. I'm going to play this little video real quick, and hopefully you guys can hear it. Let me know. Who am I looking at right now? Tess, give me a thumbs up if you can hear the sound. Hopefully. Is there sound? Oh, there we go. I realize, you know what's funny? I just realized the sound is coming from my it's from the previous song that I had going, not this. There's no sound on this. That's so funny. Anyways, guys, family reunion is around the corner, and finally it's going to be in person. First time that we've been in person for 2 years. So I highly encourage you to go. We're kind of building up that team of leadership and staff who's going to be attending, as well as the agents that's going to be going as well. And if there's one good thing that came out of the pandemic experience, is that there is a virtual component. So before, it was like you're either in person or not at all. You missed the event entirely. There is going to be a virtual component. So if you're unable to, or you're not feel comfortable traveling yet, you can jump on virtually. I will tell you though that the virtual and in-person experience is two entirely different things. So if you can go in person, you please try to. There's different, as KW continues to grow, they've announced a sports and entertainment department, and that's growing too. And there's a lot of professional athletes and celebrities that are in that realm and helping. So that's something new. And I'm hearing that they might be doing a show based on some of that stuff too, which is going to be interesting and great for branding too. KW Military is a new division that's opened up. You can read about this in Outfront that's just come out. This one is going to be super disruptive. So I don't know if you guys have heard of this already, but KW School of Real Estate is going to be completely free. So as from a growth perspective, there's a lot of real estate schools out there for pre-licensing. A lot of local companies, a lot of national companies that charge anywhere from $500 to $1,000 for tuition. KW has just put together, and they're not rolled out in Hawaii yet. I think so far they're approved in like 25 states. So we're halfway there. But we have 100% free tuition. So talk about growth. We already have 185,000 agents worldwide, and we're expected to grow substantially as a result of this effort. So if you want to build your downline, or you have people that whether in Hawaii or outside of Hawaii in your sphere that are interested in joining KW, what an unbelievable opportunity to say, hey, we have pre-licensing available for you for free. So that's going to be awesome. So you can help grow your profit share, profit tree. We also have new things that are coming down with regards to development and building. Emory models are coming out too. That's a new course. Some of the things that are in Outfront, check that out. It's all digital now. It's not I don't think they send that out anymore. So you can jump on to Connect and get access to that. In Command, all the new holiday tiles are available. So make sure that you jump on to use that. And here's another quick video. Let's see if I can play this. There you go. So Command is all gone mobile now. So we had Command already. Kelly is now gone by the wayside. This is Command Mobile. If you haven't already done so, I highly recommend you download it. They spent a lot of time in developing this, and it's really, really good. So all of your contacts are in there. You can make calls through there and have it logged in, save things in there, access smart plans, create smart plans, tasks, all those kind of things, accept leads, send out leads, all through your phone. How amazing is that? So it syncs up obviously with your actual command too. So you can be in one spot. So if you haven't done so, please download that. It looks very, very cool. I've been toying with it and playing with it, and it's pretty amazing. So that is it. I'm going to pass this on to Shannon and Tess and our partners over at First Hawaii Title. And what we're talking about today, and this is great for brand new agents especially, but it's also for experienced agents, is there's so many questions with escrow. I have some questions written down too, so I can't wait till the very end where we can kind of have a little bit of an open forum to ask questions too. But I'm going to hand it over to Shannon. Shannon, please introduce yourself and your team.
If you don't mind, could I just take it a step and introduce everyone? I'm going to have to head out soon, but I just wanted to pop in really, really quick and tell everyone happy holidays.
Or
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Or anyone from First Hawaii.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Oh, I can't hear you, Tess.
I can. We can.
Okay.
Wait, can I hear it? I can't hear. Can someone else hear?
I heard no, everyone else.
Shannon, okay. Can you say something?
Hey, Chad.
Oh,
yes, I can hear.
Okay, that's on my end. Got it. It's all you.
Like I said, I'm going to be being Santa's helper today, but I wanted to pop in really quick and say hello and happy holidays to everyone and give a wonderful introduction to our team members. Today, you guys are going to be so happy. We have Shannon Cortez, our Hawaii State escrow manager here, and we have Sean and Liberty, amazing, talented escrow officers that is going to help with this training today. First Hawaii is here to completely support you with all your services for escrow and title. My job here is to help you with your business development. I know you guys have Command. I am familiar with your Command CRM, but I'm still here to help you with anything else you need in regards to helping you promote your listings to at least agents here on all your islands with eBlast and FarmList. Our talented escrow officers can help you with net sheets and any escrow and title questions you may have. With that said, I'm going to turn everything to Shannon Cortez. She is, again, super talented, and we are here to always support you. Thank you.
Thanks, Tess. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for allowing myself, Sean, and Liberty jump in on our presentation. We are definitely here for you all. We're in a growing stage within First Hawaii Title. We've opened up several offices and are opening up several more. Just to give you folks a brief background, we have Sean is currently one of our senior escrow officers, and he is out of our merchant office currently. He will be moving over with his team to our Kapolei office. Hopefully, our goal is to have that office up and running by the end of January. Also with Sean is Liberty. She is also one of our senior escrow officers. Liberty is also located out of our merchant office, and they will both be taking the lead in today's presentation. We are looking forward to our Q&A session at the end. If you have any questions as they present, you can place them in the chat, and Chad can address those with all three of us at the end of our session. And I just wanted to confirm that everyone can see my screen. First Hawaii Title Corporation helping you write your story. Perfect. Thanks, Lisa. Okay, so we will go to slide 2. Sean and Liberty, we are ready for you.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Glad to see you all. To start the escrow process, I'm echoing.
Okay, now we can't hear you.
I think he's probably working out
Yeah.
the microphone. We all have issues this morning with technology. While he's figuring that out, let me tell you the funny, not so funny story on what my issue was this morning. Is I'm trying to be healthy over here and drinking my green drink, and I dumped it all over my desk, which got into my mixer and my microphone and my outlets, and it was a whole situation. Thankfully, no one heard me swear except for Jewel, poor Jewel. And I keep doing this, like my hands keep sticking to my desk, and I'm like, it's pretty gross. But anyways, while we let Sean work out the bugs. So let's see how many people are on today. We got 20 agents. I think most of the agents are relatively on the newer side, which is good. I think, Lisa, didn't you have a call that or a class scheduled with First Hawaii Title recently? For scheduling wise, it didn't come to fruition, right?
Yeah, it was actually our market center one about 2
Okay.
weeks ago. So this is perfect.
Okay. I think Sean is probably trying to reconnect into the Zoom. But escrow is super important, guys. So what their primary function is. They are a neutral third party that holds the funds and communicates with all parties. And they, in Hawaii, especially in Shannon, you can speak to this too. In the mainland, it's very common for title and escrow to be two separate companies. Whereas in Hawaii, that hardly happens. I don't think I've ever seen that once. Right? Is that just because people don't know that, or what do you think that is, Shannon?
I think it's more of simplifying the process to have both your escrow and your title funneling under one roof. It basically streamlines, right, the processing both for you folks as agent as well as your title and escrow company. When we start to deal with escrow with First Hawaii Title and say your title being handled by Fidelity, there's a lot of kind of back and forth, and it may confuse the process and bring in a lot more detail that both for the escrow side and the title side that we aren't real familiar with how Fidelity processes, how First Hawaii processes. So having escrow funnel through one roof is definitely more common in Hawaii than being in the mainland states. And I apologize, Sean and Liberty, they are having technical difficulties. So they're going to disconnect and reconnect, and I will basically take the lead.
Oh,
And here they come. I see them coming back on.
Oh, what perfect timing.
So I see them connecting to audio. Typically, the problem is that there's two connections or a speaker on that's feeding back into the microphone.
Got it. Sean, Liberty, are you folks able to hear and?
Yes, sorry, we had to switch to the cell phone.
Perfect. We are ready for you folks.
Okay. You want to take the lead?
Mhm.
Okay. So, hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Liberty. So we're basically just gonna go over what our escrow process is, basically like life of an escrow and what we do on a daily. So let's say you get a contract, you receive the accepted real estate contract, you open escrow with us. And I guess this is when the inspection period begins. So then that's when your deposits and earnest money gets delivered to our offices, and we open our order and process on our end. So what that means on our end is once we receive the fully executed contract, we do process it and start an initial request to our title side where we need to open and request our preliminary title report. And with that preliminary title report is what they do with our title side is they do a search on the property itself. With all the findings of any liens, encumbrances, recorded documents that's related to the property itself. So within that time period, it usually takes about within like 3 to 5 days to process. But even during that duration, as escrow, we're still processing on our end, meaning that we're contacting you, your clients, and we're basically taking down any information that's provided to us from your buyers or sellers, whether it's email, contact information, addresses, because at this time, we're trying to send out our opening instructions. Now, opening instructions to escrow in our escrow world is very important, only because this is where we gather all of your clients' information, whether it be where they live, their payoff information, their SS number to compare with liens and judgments that could occur. And that way, when we get closer, working with your lender, we're basically putting together a closing statement on both sides, whether it be for your lenders, so they can process their loan estimates, or for your sellers, so they can get an idea of what their closing costs and their estimates is going to be when they close and record. So during that process, of course, we're gathering all the information. We're working closely with your lenders. We're also working closely with attorneys so that we can prepare and request for the deed transfer and all that good stuff. Now we're going to fast forward to our actual 2 weeks into escrow. Now going 2 weeks to 3 weeks, where we should already have everything in file. So this is when we're going to contact our agents and basically coordinate signings. So this is where we're like, hey, let's get ready to close. This is our closing date. So let's coordinate and sign with your clients, whether it be seller or buyers. And this is when we should have the drafted estimated statements ready for review. We should coordinate already the signing and collect funds to close, and just basically work with the lenders to close the transaction. Prior to that, in order for us to record a transaction, we do follow the title report itself. So within the title report, there is requirements that we need to follow in order to fulfill and satisfy the transfer of the transactions in free and clear to the buyers. So usually title insurance, the title insurance. Okay, you want to go ahead?
No, we're gonna go through that. We're gonna go slide by slide.
Okay, so right now we're still in escrow. So just talking about title, we're gonna go over title soon, but just saying that, we do follow the requirements and guidelines in order to transfer title free and clear. Prior to doing that, we turn that into our recording department so they can do their review and final date down and all the good stuff before we submit to record. And then of course, before we can record, we need funds in escrow. So that usually takes about 2 business days, where we would require to have funds in escrow at least 2 business days prior to recording. And the reason is because we follow this good funds law, where we have to ensure that the funds are cleared before we could submit to record on the actual day of recordation. You want to take over?
Sure. You want to go to the next slide, Shannon?
Sorry, I'm talking a little fast.
Common question, what is escrow? As an escrow officer, I get asked this a lot. What do you do? I'm an escrow officer. What does that mean? Escrow, we are a neutral third party. We cannot show favoritism to either side of the transaction. We have to remain neutral. A common misconception by parties is that escrow will tell you what to do, which is wrong. Escrow actually works off of instructions from the buyer, the seller, the listing agent, or the buyer's agent. We do not actually instruct folks what to do. We take instructions, and then we make sure that the instructions that we receive are then given to all parties on a flat surface table, saying this is what we're being instructed to do. Does everyone agree and comply? That is basically the function of an escrow officer, to make sure that we act on behalf of the buyer and seller without taking sides and remain neutral throughout the transaction. Our job is to also keep everybody informed of things happening through the transaction and make sure that everyone's on a level playing field. We try our best to make the process as smooth as possible, with a lot of moving parts and moving hands. It's not always that easy, but we try our best to strive for that. And also, we try to eliminate the guesswork. So if your clients don't understand something that's being presented to them, we can try to explain it to the best of our abilities. There are forms and documents that they will receive in a transaction, especially for a seller, where we can't answer because we're not qualified. A lot of times we'll get questions about taxes.
Yep.
We are not CPAs, we're not certified CPAs. So unfortunately, we can't answer tax questions because then that makes us liable if we give misinformation. Other forms such as the FERPTA and HARPTA. We can explain it in general, but if a buyer or seller has a technical question on filling out the form, we cannot give an indication of how to complete the form because it is not actually an escrow form. The HARPTA form is a state of Hawaii form, and the FERPTA form is a federal government form. So we are not the creators of the form, so we can't actually tell you exactly how to fill it out. We can show you what needs to be filled out, but we cannot define the form for you or your clients. Another thing is identification. A lot of times when you come to signing, we have to have a valid picture government form of ID, such as your driver's license. We've had a bunch where the driver's license was expired. During the time of COVID, it was acceptable, but I believe the governor's order has since expired for that. And that government ID would have to be still within its issuance date and not expired.
Sean, can I interrupt you for one quick second?
Yeah.
Jocelyn, did you have a question?
Yes, I have a question on the HARPTA.
Yeah.
Because my current listing is a seller out of state. Do I need to do more on my end for HARPTA to let title and escrow?
So I would be proactive in finding out from your client whether are they military?
No.
They're not military. Where do they file their taxes?
It's a trust. So it's a
It's complicated.
entity handling basically like a probate.
Okay, so it's a trust.
Was trust established here?
Was the trust established in Hawaii or was the trust established in another state?
Washington.
So then it would be subject to HARPTA.
Yes.
And if they would like, depending on what this tax situation or situation is, they could file for the exemption once escrow opens. We could give them the documentation that they could fill out the documentation and try to apply for an exemption from the state, because usually that process can take 2 to 3 weeks.
Yeah.
2 to 3 weeks to complete. So that way, during the time of the transaction, we handle it up front, get that paperwork to the state, and they'll come back with a judgment saying, okay, yes, we can waive it, or no, they have to collect X amount, or they have to pay the full HARPTA. But
Okay.
you know, if they don't want to pay the full HARPTA, they can go that route, or we can just collect the HARPTA and they can file their taxes with the state and get any refunds if there are any.
They can file for an early return too.
Yes.
So Jocelyn, what Sean is basically kind of getting to is within escrow, it's very important that you folks as agents, you have that communication, right? You establish that communication with your clients up front, because that will, when you come into escrow and you send Sean or Liberty your opening escrow instructions, you can right off the top tell Liberty or Sean, hey, my client may be subject to HARPTA withholding, but they indicated that they there really is no gain from their sale of the subject property. Sean and Liberty can then communicate with your clients that they have several options. One would be to file the N-288B, which would be within your escrow transaction, or they continue to process and close the transaction as scheduled and file the N-288C post-closing. Sometimes the state does take longer than 3 weeks to get us that exemption certificate back, and we cannot close. Escrow will never be in a position to close unless we have that document in. And the reason for that is if you represent the seller and the buyer is actually the true withholding agent, right? Escrow is assisting with filing that form, but the buyer is the true withholding agent. And if we were to close and say the state come back and not approve that exemption that was submitted, guess who's subject to penalties, interest, and filing? It's the buyer. And then it falls back onto escrow. So it's so important that we have these documents in line. The communication is established. and it will help your file actually, your escrow, be able to meet your recordation or your anticipated closing date.
Okay, yeah, because I prepped my seller and we're in escrow with Fidelity, but I just wanted to prep everybody since this has been a complicated listing for me. So, okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks for asking, Jocelyn. You know, one thing I just want to say for new agents, regardless of your situation, it's really, really important to understand what your client's situation is and communicate that not only with your broker and how we can help guide you, but also with all the parties that are involved with the transaction, such as escrow. Because in my experience, there are a variety of different ways that escrow can be, and I don't mean escrow meaning the company, escrow in the process, be delayed. And it's not, and some of it can easily be avoided by if you just got started on something early on, or you informed the escrow officer, this is the situation, or the loan officer, this is the situation, so that you can work on some of those things early on to avoid any delays, especially if you have a fast close. 30 days seems kind of common here, but there's a lot that has to take place in 30 days.
Shannon, you want to go to the next slide?
Sure, but before I do, sorry, I'm an escrow fanatic, so I'm gonna jump in where I feel we need to jump in. I just wanted to kind of briefly go one step up of what Sean was explaining, what is escrow. It is so very important to know that escrow will never act on unilateral instructions, right? Like Sean was kind of getting through. And a lot of times when it comes, we never want to see cancellations, right? But they do happen. So when those cancellation instructions get brought to the table, I just wanted to remind everyone that we as escrow will need to wait until we receive executed, mutually signed, executed cancellation instructions before we can proceed and release funds. It's the way the market is going. There's a lot of files coming in, files going out, a lot of cancellations. So that's one thing to kind of just keep on the top of your head there, that yes, escrow mutual sign instructions never acts on unilateral instructions.
Okay, moving on. This is a big one, funds to close, especially for people working with a lot of buyers. State of Hawaii has a good funds law that requires money coming into escrow as closing funds must be in the form of a wire or a cashier's check from a local Hawaii bank. And that's the key part. You know, the cashier's check has to be from a local Hawaii bank to fall within that criteria. So if you have a buyer on the mainland, they cannot send a cashier's check. They would have to send money via wire. When sending money via wire, we've been seeing a lot lately that some banks are putting wire limits on their clients, and that can cause a delay in your closing. So your client wants to be proactive in checking with their banks to say, hey, I'm going to be buying a house. I'm going to need to wire, X amount of funds. What are your rules and regulations? I had one recently where their bank would only let them wire $25,000 per day, and they were sending in over $200,000. Needless to say, it delayed closing for over a week because they couldn't get the money to us. So those are one of the key factors to look at with closing funds and prepare your buyers ahead of time. A second one is to make sure your buyers are in close contact with their loan officers, because the loans are getting stricter on the requirements to qualify, and they want to make sure that they satisfy all of the lender requirements up front. Another big thing we're seeing right now too that may cause delays in transactions are appraisers are very backlogged. And so I am seeing transactions having to delay because the buyer's lender is still waiting to get an appraiser to go even appraise the property a week before closing. I was just actually in that situation a couple months ago, helping my mom buy a house, and we were in escrow for 42 days before the appraiser actually went out, and it was ordered the day after acceptance. So I know those are struggles that we're going through. Another one is signing of closing documents. Just kind of prepare your buyers, you know, that signing of closing documents, especially if there's a lender involved, they're looking at about an hour and a half to sign their closing documents. Make sure that their arm is well rested. They'll be signing a lot of documents, wet signature. We want to make sure they have loan approval. A big thing also is once they get loan approval, please make sure that they do not go out and go shopping. Liberty and I actually, we actually trained together as assistants for an escrow officer, and we had a transaction where the wife was so excited that they got loan approval. She went out and she spent, was it $30,000? Spent $30,000 buying all new furniture for the house. The lender then went and did a updated credit report, saw all these charges and canceled the loan, and they lost the house. So those are like tips and things to go over with your clients. Anybody have anything to add to that?
No.
Shannon? Okay, any questions? Okay, you want to go to the next slide,
I have
Shannon?
tons of questions, but I'll wait. I have tons of questions, but I'm going to wait till
Of
after
course you
your,
do, Chad.
yeah, I'm going to wait till the end for that.
Hey, I have a question. As far as the appraisal process, so say my listing, I had an appraisal done prior to listing. If the buyer has an issue with funding, can we show the appraisal report?
That would
That's a
actually
lender
be-
question. That's
yeah,
a
that would
question
go
for
to
the lender.
lender.
And just so you guys know, for my agents, most lenders don't use the appraisal ordering process. It's a blind process. It's ordered through something called an appraisal management company. And most lenders don't share that appraisal report. In very rare circumstance can one lender use an appraisal done for another lender, because the appraisal is not done for the benefit of the buyer. It's done for the benefit of the actual lender. But that's a side conversation that Lisa can have, or I can have with you later.
Thank you.
Okay, going on to the next slide, title insurance. You want to do the first part of this?
Okay.
Okay.
Is she on the next slide already?
Yeah, title
Okay.
insurance.
Okay, so title insurance. I know I mentioned this earlier. What title insurance? What is title insurance? Well, title insurance policy provides a peace of mind protecting the purchaser of real estate from loss associated with undiscovered defects in the title of the property. Title insurance is a one-time premium paid to a title company which guarantees ownership of a particular piece of property and ensures that no one else has a claim to that property. So what that really means in our world, in our escrow title world, is basically saying, if I were to purchase a property from Sean, and I'm the buyer and Sean's the seller, and I just want to be guaranteed that he has no liens or judgments or anything that's going to be tied to the property when I take over that ownership to title. Why do you need title insurance? Well, when you purchase a home, you need to be sure that there are no problems with its title, and that the seller really owns the property, or problems with the title can limit your use and enjoyment of the property and could also result in a significant financial loss. So what that really means is, let's say we did close down our transaction, and Sean had this, let's say, for example, a foreclosure that wasn't released properly on title, and I took ownership thinking that I got it free and clear. Well, guess what? I could go back and file a claim, because if I were to refinance and that foreclosure lien or documentation still appears on title before my ownership name, that means I go back to the title company and be like, hey, technically, I don't really own this property because it's still under foreclosure. And guess what? They can take the property away from me because it wasn't transferred properly or clearly. So that's why title insurance is important. The title search. So what that really happens in the process of escrow is, after your sales contract has been accepted, A title professional or title company will search the public records and identify any complications with the home's title. This search typically involves a review of land records going back to many years. More than 1/3 of all title searches reveal a title problem that can easily be dealt with by a title professional before going to closing. So for instance, a previous owner like Sean may have had a minor construction done on the property, but never fully paid the contractor. Or the previous owner may have failed to pay local or state taxes, right? So basically, title professions will seek to resolve those problems like these before you go to closing. So that's where escrow comes in, and they do those thorough researches and be like, hey, prior owner did not pay his taxes, or there's a financing statement that a contractor tacked on to the seller. So these are the items that need to be cleared up before a buyer takes ownership to title, and that's where escrow gets involved.
And just to kind
That
of
goes back to Chad's earlier question as to why within the state of Hawaii do we handle both the escrow and title? Just because of complications that may arise, it's easier to deal with your in-house title department versus the title team at Fidelity.
Did anyone have questions on just a synopsis of what title insurance is? Okay. What are risks? There is always a risk in anything you do, especially when you insure. Our job as escrow officers and our title side is to limit our exposure to risk of a possible claim. Same thing that your car insurance company does or your homeowner's insurance company does. I know some homeowners insurance companies now send people around to look at houses that are deemed possible risks. I know of somebody who had their insurance company drive by and then they received a letter saying that their roof looked a little dilapidated and they basically had 30 days to fix their roof or their policy to be canceled. So things like that are what we look at. What are the risks? What are the risks to you, to your consumers? What are the risks to us as the insurers? There's a list of a few things that may or may not be discovered initially, but occur frequently. Especially now that we're having a lot of the older generations, we have deeds by person of unsound mind. If you have somebody who has, let's say, dementia, and they may not be always cognizant of what's happening around them. Things like that, situations like that, we would need to know up front about those things, because then we would have to make a call to say, are they of sound mind to sign documents? Do we need to get a special power of attorney? If so, we will need doctor's notes. There's things like that that we have to look at to protect not only the buyer and seller, but to protect us to open liability. Marital rights of spouses. Hawaii is one of the unique states. We're not a community property state. So a husband can hold a property as a sole and separate from his wife, and vice versa. The wife can hold it as sole and separate. The only thing that has recently changed is when it comes time for a divorce. When it comes time to a divorce, even if one party owns it as their sole and separate, but we are aware of a divorce, there are additional documentations that we have to have signed because of the new divorce law that puts an automatic freeze to all assets of both parties. Let me see, looking through it, sorry. The foreclosure one is a big one. If you take on a listing and there is a non-judicial foreclosure in the chain of title, you will most likely hear back from whatever company that you go through. All the title companies pretty much have the same stance, that they will refer you back to the last title company who insured that property from the the point of the non-judicial foreclosure, and they will have to be the one to insure the property. I know Shannon's biting her lip to expand more on that one. I see it in her face already. Do you want to expand more on that one, Shannon?
No, thanks for bringing that one up, Sean. That's a really big one right now with the non-judicial foreclosures. So I think my recommendation to you folks as agents, when you take on a listing, reach out to us. Have us pull a broker's pre. That way we can kind of go through to see, what if there's any items that have to be addressed for you straight out the gate. It will make your lives easier, will make our lives easier. The non-judicials, if you will know within 3 days, if there is a non-judicial foreclosure within the chain, so one of our escrow officers will respond back and say, unfortunately, we are not in a position to insure, but here's a copy of the last recorded deed. This is a title company who assisted. They will most likely be in a position to insure. That's really what we're seeing a lot right now. There are instances where we have broker prelims done. We send that out to a specific agent. They come back and they say, hey, we're missing a mortgage on there, right? And we're like, well, we're not showing any mortgage. We go back to our title team. They're really digging deep. They come back and they're like, Shannon, there's absolutely no mortgage recorded on that subject property. We end up finding another mortgage in the name of that client. We review it. We have our title team review it. Guess what? That exhibit that's attached to that mortgage is on another property, not our subject property. So that's common, right? That's a title claim. We go back to the previous company who insured, they clean that up, and now you're golden because you've addressed one of the major issues that will probably be a huge delay if you were to get a contract up front and open escrow.
I have a question, Shannon, about that. I was waiting, but since you mentioned that, a lot of this is coming from MERS, right? Is that whole incident? So with that being said, I have a two-part question is there a certain amount of time that a title company or insurance company that will lapse, that they'll feel comfortable insuring that issue, or will it always be deferred back for sake of risk and liability back to the title insurance company that insured it? And if that's the case, have you ever seen one where a title insurance company is no longer in business? If that's the case, who insures it then?
Yeah, very, very good question. And that is one of the things that we are dealing with. And a company will make a business decision to insure a subject property. There are a couple of things that come into play. How old is that mortgage? The amount of the mortgage. We kind of really dig deep, have our officers check every single public record to make sure that wasn't transferred, or that company's not in business, or maybe the seller has the release and never filed it, recorded it. So yes, business decisions can be made after review of the entire circumstance. That goes up to our national VP of our title manager to give us the final go ahead with that. The downside with that is because a business decision is being made, the odds of your seller, when they go to sell the property, or your buyer go to sell the property, down the line, and say the purchase contract is written, I'm going to use Fidelity again, Fidelity on there. Fidelity comes back and they pull a title report, and now they see that mortgage still on title because it was not properly released. So the odds of you having to come back to first what you title, 99.9% of the time you'll have to come back to the title company who insured that transaction where the business decision was made.
So does something like that put a permanent cloud on title then? That it's not a distance, you can't create a distance of time to relieve you of that issue. It's going to be there 30 years from now, for that matter. It's going to be that issue. Is that right?
Yes, correct.
So
Until such time a proper release is recorded.
So I think that to reinforce the takeaway that you guys briefly touched on for my agents is it's really important to research and do your homework on this. We're not just salespeople that kind of throw agreements together and hopefully have someone list with us to sell a property, or on the other side of it too. But we really got to do some research to make sure that we know everything we can about the property, because if you're on the list side and this is something that you could have at least discovered or found out about, you could have got ahead of it and either corrected it or at least put on the MLS that we need to use this title company because there's a cloud on title or whatever the case might be. So that's great information. Thank you.
You want to go to the next slide, Shannon? Oh, it's the policy. Yeah.
Okay, so title insurance and types of policies. So we have two types of policies for our clients, our buyers. So the owner's policy is basically for a purchase. Owner's title insurance, called an owner's policy, is usually issued in the amount of the real estate purchase. So it is a purchase for a one-time fee at closing, and that's for as long as you or your heirs have an interest in the property. Only an owner's title, owner's policy fully protects the buyer should, oh my God, I can't even talk right now. Sorry. Only an owner's policy fully protects the buyer should a covered title problem arises. So an owner's policy provides assurance that your title company will stand behind you monetarily and with a legal defense. If a covered title problem arises after you buy your home, the bottom line is that your title company will be there to help pay valid claims and cover the cost of defending an attack on your title, as well as you and your heirs own the property. Receiving an owner's policy isn't always an automatic part of the closing process. In different parts of the country, either the buyer or the seller may be responsible for providing the owner's coverage. So it may not be required, but be sure you request an owner's policy and ask how it's paid for according terms of your purchase contract. So what that really means is in your real estate contract itself, it is
Oops, you muted.
in the contract where it mentioned the closing costs. So to say seller buyer 50-50 on escrow and then 60-40 for seller buyer and title. So it's already mentioned in there like who pays what. Loan policy, of course, if there is a lender involved in a purchase, a loan policy is required because the lender wants to have a title insurance to cover their collateral as well. So there are two types of the title insurance: owner's title insurance, as mentioned above, and the lender's title insurance, also called the Alta policy. So most lenders require loan policy when they issue you a loan. The loan policy is usually based on the dollar amount of the loan, and it protects the lender's interest in the property should a problem with the title arise. It does not protect the buyer. The policy amount decreases each year and eventually disappears as the loan is paid off. So that means is, let's say your client took out a loan for $250,000. They paid the loan off. They hit the lotto and they paid that loan off within 2 years. So there's no loan policy at that point. So it just disappears after they pay it off.
To kind of expand on what Liberty is saying about the different types of policies. So on resale transactions, which you folks as realtors handle mostly, there is a standard owner's policy, and then there's the homeowner's policy. We default to the homeowner's policy for your buyers, which is actually a 10% premium for the buyer markup of the cost of the total policy. As per the contract standard terms, it's a 60-40 split on a standard policy, and then the buyers pay a 10% premium for a homeowner's policy. The reason we do this is the homeowner's policy is most beneficial to your buyers and provides them with the most maximum coverage possible. Should anything come up, it gives them that coverage that they would need for the property to stake a claim. The exception to this rule is that if it is a REO purchase, REO purchases, because of the amount of liability that's involved in doing an REO purchase, we only issue standard owner's policies. as well as commercial transactions and vacant land will only get a standard owner's policy. Shannon, do you have anything to add?
I do. One more thing, one more thing to consider is if you are representing a buyer, and we do have we're starting to see a lot of investor clients come in, and they are obtaining financing via a hard money lender. If that is the case with your buyer, your client, get with your escrow officer. There will be other requirements that will have to be set forth from the get-go, because our underwriters, I think overall, just in general, across the board, underwriters are kind of raising red flags with hard money lending. So they may require a copy of the appraisal. They will require specific documents from the lender, the hard money lender that's funding. So if you are aware that your client will be obtaining hard money financing, definitely advise your escrow officer.
Hey, can I
Wait,
chime
you
in on
went
the
ahead,
hard money
Shannon.
conversation, Shannon?
Yes, of course, Lisa.
So we've seen before, both in my practice in California and working with agents here, that whether you represent a buyer or a seller, and you see that sellers, especially flippers, have hard money loans. They work through consortiums where they have access to funds that are typically not your normal bank loans. It's not atypical for these to be cross-collateralized, meaning that maybe they did a flip on Aikahi Street, and that lender required them to cross-collateralize every other property they own. And when you see that on a prelim, or if you're the listing agent, you know you're working with the flipper, we've seen that that can slow down close of escrows tremendously, because the requirements of that lender to do a analysis of what they owe on all the properties and pay it down, I've seen it slow it down by 3 and 4 months.
That is an awesome point to bring up. That will require escrow to get in touch with the hard money lender and request a partial release for the bridge loan or the cross collateralization. And if they don't, if they don't provide that to us after they analyze the overall, I guess the financials, the property value of the actual seller, it definitely may delay your closing. Great point.
Closing costs. Typical closing costs for your transaction, of course, will be the title insurance premium. The seller pays 60%, the buyer pays 40% as per the contract. Real estate commissions. This is a big one for us. When you open escrow, if you're representing the listing agent, on your escrow instructions, if you could provide exactly what your percentage amount of the commission split you are taking is. I know with Keller Williams, we get the DA closer to closing, but if we know upfront, because what agents are doing now is, say it's 5%, instead of, in past times, it would be a normal split 50-50 buyer seller agent. Now some agents are taking 3 and giving the buyer's agent 2, or they're taking 2 and giving the buyer's agent 3. And so for us, it's kind of a guessing game, because we don't know unless you clearly tell us what the split is going to be based on the commission amounts.
So what I normally would ask a lot of my listing agents is, I always ask for the listing agreement. And this really helps only because it validates the actual commission that was agreed upon, the listing presentation. And I compare it to the co-op agreement to really confirm, the co-op side and the listing side. And this is to avoid any mistakes that could happen at the very end. So this is assurance for us to help our clients get paid or our agents get paid. So this is very helpful.
Another one you'll see is especially if you're in a condo or a home with an association, you'll see transfer fees or assumption fees. And a lot of times for the seller side, we'll be collecting, say we close in the first week of a new month. They may not have paid their HOA. We'll collect that from the seller, but we'll prorate it back to the difference back to them for the remainder of the month. On the buyer side, the buyer will pay any transfer fees. Then we'll collect through prorations the remainder of that month, as well as we will collect the following month from them for that HOA. The reason we do that is the HOAs request that we do that, so it gives them time to update their system and their paperwork, but they want to make sure it's still paid on time while they update it and transfer it to the new buyer. Another one is our standard escrow fees, which is a 50-50 split. Escrow fees are subject to general excise tax. A common misconception is general excise tax is calculated based on where the escrow services are conducted. So if your escrow officer is on Maui, the GE tax will be different than if your escrow officer is in Honolulu, because they have different GET tax percentage rates. Oahu's a little more expensive because we're paying for the rail. Any additional settlement charges? We have, of course, all of the charges associated with the loan. Appraisal fee you'll see on your statement for your buyers. A lot of lenders will actually collect the appraisal fee up front from the buyer. So the buyer, on the buyer statement, you'll see that it's paid outside of closing because the buyer already prepaid for the appraisal fee. Property taxes. This is a big one. As a listing agent, one thing I would ask, what would be good to ask your sellers is if they have any form of property tax assessments or exemptions. This is one we're seeing now where a lot of people are applying for disability exemptions on their property taxes, and they don't disclose it. And so what happens is, if no one is aware of this exemption, and we try to catch it on the escrow side, but it's not always fully disclosed in the real property tax information, is that once the seller sells the house and they don't file the proper paperwork with the tax office, which is the form that you have to send in within 30 days of closing saying that you no longer own the property and you've relinquished your exemption. If the tax office finds out you sold the property and didn't file the proper paperwork, they go back after the buyer and make them pay back all of those exempted taxes that you received for the previous fiscal year, which could be thousands of dollars. An instance that we're working on of that happening, it was over $3,000 that the new buyer got hit with because the seller didn't disclose that they had a tax exemption. So that's a big one to ask your sellers. Credit report fee, standard for loan, hazard insurance, and hazard insurance premium. A big one for us on escrow is we always make sure that all of those, any kind of insurance premium that the lender requires, we send those out certified mail so that it can be tracked. Because if they come back and say they never received payment and they cancel the policy and something happens to the house, of course, they're going to come back to us and be like, hey, you didn't pay this and you collected it from us. So they'll file a claim with us. We don't want that. Another one is escrow reserves. We try to explain to buyers, and some get it and some don't. So they're like, oh, you have escrow impounds. Escrow impounds with a lender and escrow as a whole are two different things. I get calls all the time from clients that close and say, my insurance payment wasn't made, did you pay it out of my escrow impounds? And I'm like, that's through your lender, which is separate from escrow itself. Escrow itself is where one time when you purchase or sell or you refinance your house. Escrow impounds are what your lender collects in your mortgage payment, and they pay that out through your loan to ensure the security of your loan. Those are common questions that we get from clients. Any questions on that part?
Oh, we went over this already.
No, let's just go over it. Just do a brief overview.
Okay. So, so the very last slide is what do I pay for? So as I mentioned earlier about the closing cost split, the contract, along with any applicable government regulations, ultimately determines who will pay which closing costs. So basically, our agents and our loan officers will guide our clients through this process. So it is mentioned in the purchase contract itself, but it goes over what the buyer generally will pay for and what the seller generally will pay for. Of course, we mentioned the 40% of the standard owner's policy for the buyers, 50%, so it's 50-50. Buyers will pay 50, seller pays 50. Notary fees, recording costs, homeowners association transfers, new loan charges, interest to the loan, assumptions of the HOA, the statement, the warranty, hazard and type insurance, courier fees, professional home inspection, and tax proration. These are all buyer's charges. Generally, the seller will pay 60% of the title insurance. They're also paid for the commission, the listing agreement, half of the escrow fee, any type of loan requirements that the buyer's lender won't allow the buyers to pay, the seller will absorb. Of course, their payoff, their current mortgage payoff, the deed transfer, homeowners association, this is a big one. So we all know Associa charges a processing fee, and as well as condo docs. So sellers will pay for condo docs. Recording charges to release anything that's on title right now on the seller is what the sellers will pay for. Current property taxes, for sellers will pay for. Survey, termite, conveyance tax is a huge one where sellers will pay for depending on the price of the property, and then any repairs per the contract. So these are the split costs between our buyers and sellers, and we usually follow this unless we are told otherwise by way of addendum and instructions to split the cost in any different from what is shown here. Any questions?
I just wanted to add onto Liberty's recap. You folks as agents will receive a copy of if you're representing the seller, you'll receive a copy of the seller's estimated settlement statement. You will receive, if you're representing the buyer, you will receive a copy of the buyer's statement. We as escrow are sending that over to you folks to do a review, right? We do our review. We have all our invoices. We're matching it up to everything that's on the settlement statement. We've received all of the loan fees. We're inputting that, matching that up. We want you folks to review that statement. So if you have any questions, anything doesn't look right, there may be a fee missing or an invoice wasn't sent, that's basically your time to come back to escrow and say, hey, just checking, did you receive this invoice for the termite inspection? Did you receive this invoice for the home inspection? So when we as escrow officers sit with your clients, we really want to make you folks look like superstars, right? We want you to basically be like, I caught all of that, and here we go. This is our product. This is our final settlement statement. Everything's in line. There's no worries, and we're closing the transaction, and your client's getting a good takeaway from the closing experience. So that's our ultimate goal.
I have one to add. This is very important too, especially if you're dealing with a lender in a transaction. Anytime that there's a seller credit or any type of credit going to our buyer, it is good to disclose it up front. And the only reason why is because the lender needs to take in account to let their underwriter review those credits. So let's say that we're about to close tomorrow and then we get a credit for $1,000 for cleaning fee. It becomes an issue because the lender is like, wait a minute, there shouldn't be any credits after we sign. So therefore, you should have disclosed it upfront already. So we cannot allow any credits after the fact that the client's got a loan approval and such, because it delays the process again. So any credits or any type of invoices that you want to add, do it upfront. So that way, when we disclose our closing statements to the lender, they get to review everything. And once we disclose it, that's it.
Yeah, that's an amazing point, Liberty, because it's so very important with the change in TRID. The lenders take the lead on a lot of items. So if you foresee an addendum being put into place, contact the lender. You may want to double check with them on the verbiage, right? Because escrow, it should be agent working with the lender, escrow being provided with a copy of the approved lender addendum. So very good point, Liberty.
Thank you.
I have a couple of questions to ask. How quickly can you guys close on an all cash deal? And I'm talking about specifically like the escrow title portion of it. Is that, because I get people asking me all the time, hey, it's all cash, I'm going to close in 7 days. And I'm like, oh my God, 7 days.
Well, it depends if there's any contingencies or if there's a lot of things that are waived. I've closed a cash deal in 3 days where everything, like the condo docs were waived, the termite was waived. Like there's nothing, there's no contingencies where they're like, we'll waive everything, we just want to close this deal. And I'm like, okay, well, let's close it. So that's the fastest I've done.
Okay.
But 7 days is possible, but it just all depends on the circumstances of the contract.
Another thing, Chad, too, if the agents actually ordered a broker's prelim for the title update, we're looking at a shorter time period than actually going in and requesting a full new title search. So that would be another reason why getting the broker pre's up front may be helpful.
Got it. Yeah, the preparation part of it. Another question is, what happens, and by the way, some of these questions are coming from a lot of the new agents will ask me questions, and I hear these kind of things a lot. So I think it's great that you guys are adding a little bit of color to that explanation. What happens on the day of recordation? Like I think some people go, okay, it's recording day. And then, Sean's over there hitting this big red button that boom. And then it like recording happens and confetti falls and balloons fly up. But what actually takes place?
So basically on recordation, it's the actual day that the stamped and certified copy from the Bureau of Conveyances shows that the property has transferred hands. Technically, we submit the documentation to the Bureau 2 days prior to, but the Bureau takes 2 days to process it. So the date of recordation is the actual day that the property will actually transfer hands and the seller is no longer the owner and the buyer becomes the owner of the property on record with the Bureau.
As of 8:01.
And that always occurs at 8:01 a.m.
And we get that great call from Sean at 8:01. Congratulations, you closed, right? Another question is, and I know you guys are escrow is a neutral third party, right? And I know you guys need bilateral confirmation on the release of earnest money. I'm sure this is a hot topic always, but my question is in the contract, and maybe it's because it's interpretation of the contract, but in the contract, it will state that should the buyer cancel due to this contingency or whatever it is, and based upon this termination clause, that either the seller is going to be receiving their earnest money deposit or the buyer is going to be receiving it. It'll state it on there, but it's always, and it's not just for Hawaii title, it's a state of Hawaii thing because other states operate a little differently, but the state of Hawaii, all escrow companies will take the position of, no, we can't do anything without mutual consent, even though in the contract it spells out what all parties are agreeing to. Why is it just liability issue? Is that the reason why?
It is a legal and liability issue because it may state on the contract but then the other party may say, well, we didn't do this because this person didn't do this. And we're not the judge and jury, we just follow instructions. So for that portion of it, we have to have the discussion, and then the agents would have to talk to each other and say, hey, you know what, we did agree on this, have your client sign it. We can't make that determination just because then it would hold us liable, because then the buyer would come back and say, but you're neutral. And even though the contract said this, here's my defense, then said that. You know, we're not actual licensed legal people to make that determination, because it's the contract is a legal document.
I have had instances in the past where either by way of an amendment or in section Q, additional, special clauses or special terms in the contract, where people would add a non-boilerplate type of verbiage. So as an example, buyer's initial deposit becomes non-refundable after X date, whatever it is. And I would say more often than not, in those unusual, rare circumstances, the escrow company will honor that extra verbiage.
Yeah.
Is that something that you guys honor as well? So it's basically the non-boilerplate type of thing that you guys will honor.
Yeah, so it has to be very specific.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen also lately too is they'll say funds not refundable after this date and is to be released to the seller.
I actually have that right now in a contract to
And
release
so
the deposit.
we'll do an early release of funds and have everyone sign off on the early release of funds to acknowledge it. And then once that date occurs, we'll actually just cut that money to the seller upfront.
So if you had something like that, either in a contract or by way of an amendment, and then for whatever reason closing doesn't occur, you don't need bilateral agreement at that point because you already had it in the amendment itself if it's worded very specifically?
Correct.
Okay, that's good to know.
Specifically written.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Another
and
question.
Chad, we draft our own document as well prior to releasing those funds. So once that document comes back signed by all parties, Sean would be in a position to release those funds upon that specific date.
So if we had an amendment or a clause in there early on, because early on everyone's still dating, everyone likes each other. We're not divorced yet. So do you have them sign that document when everyone's still dating, or is it now you sign that document when they're divorcing?
Once we get the written instructions to do that, we send out that document.
Okay. And then for interpleader, what is the threshold amount to go into? Because I know interpleader costs money, and if it doesn't hit that amount, it kind of just sits there in escrow purgatory for who knows how long. And how many months pass before someone at escrow says, okay, this has got to go towards interpleader if that amount is met?
That's Shannon. That's her favorite word.
She did flinch when I said interpleader. I saw her face kind of do a little.
That's her favorite word.
Those files are so fun. And honestly, we don't like to hold funds in escrow. We want to get them over as soon as we can so that action can start going in the background. I actually have one file where I sent over to our attorney for $10,000. It's been about 2.5 years, and those funds are still there. The attorneys from both sides are still working on it. We definitely don't like those types of files. That no limit. I think it's case by case scenario. When I start seeing things kind of really turning for the worse, that's when we'll come in and we'll issue our 30 days notice to interplead, basically putting all parties on notice that, hey, some sort of resolution needs to be given to escrow within the next 30-day period. If we don't receive mutual signed instructions, we will have we will make that decision to turn our file over to interplead. And then our attorneys basically come into play, reach out to the parties, really take the ball to keep the ball rolling. We hold our file, the funds in escrow until we receive notification from the attorney that's handling that the court has approved the funds to be handed over to the attorney trust account.
And interpleader costs money, correct?
Oh, it does. It does.
And how much does it cost? Does it vary?
It varies depending on the amount of funds and how much work the attorneys put into that specific case. And that's another thing. The language within the interpleader letter when we issue our 30 days notice, because the funds is basically the buyer's funds, right? The buyer comes in with the initial deposit. There's $10,000-$20,000 in there. The attorney basically puts them on notice that escrow has $20,000. The attorney's costs will basically deplete the funds that we currently hold in escrow. So we really try to push it prior to that handing it over, because by the time the case is done, the funds in escrow it all went to attorney costs.
It could be entirely depleted or close to it.
Mm-hmm.
Got it. This is an unusual one, but it comes up every now and again. I've successfully done this a handful of times. Although I know escrow companies cringe and hate this question is, are you able to, and if so, for how long, hold funds after closing for repairs?
Yeah.
Thank you, Liberty. Tell me how you really feel about it.
Well, the goal for us is, and the reason why we don't like holding funds is only because we get audited on our end, and it's like we get graded, and it's one of those things where you get reminded constantly, like, when are you releasing the funds and why is there still money in there? And we're just like, oh gosh, it's for repairs, like, chill out. But a lot of times, I've had one, it was held for 3 months, and this is on a Kahala property because they had to do some type of dredging on the property, like a beachfront property. And at 3 months went by, hear nothing. Of course, we followed up and we're like, okay, so what's going on? And they're like, oh, hold it for another 3 months. I'm like, okay, send out another instruction. So usually there's a hold funds agreement in escrow, and we cannot release the funds until both parties mutually agree that such and such is already completed and done, and to release the funds to whoever. So it can go from 3 to 6 months, and that's the longest I've held it for.
Got
But
it. And I know that's rare. I know you guys hate that. The lender hates that too, but sometimes things come up, right?
Yeah.
Yes, please
happen.
don't, because I have a filing cabinet full from Shannon. I have files from when I was in high school with money in it. Honest to God. I have files from when I was in high school that still have money in them.
Liberty and Sean are totally correct. I will pounce and hound them with their funds that are currently sitting in files, and they do not like that because they have to justify as to why those funds are there. We look for the withholding instructions. We definitely don't want to hold funds for longer than a 6-month period, because things can happen. Clients can come back and they can be a disagreement. We hold those funds, and guess what? It's subject to interpreter action too for funds withheld in escrow. So typically, the faster the funds are, or the withholding is completed, the less dramatic will be in the escrow side. So we definitely try to push it. And Chad, just another thing on the lender. Anytime we withhold funds from, and there's a lender involved, the lender does have to be aware, right, of that withholding, because they'll see it on our settlement statement. So just be mindful that the lender has been apprised of that withholding of funds.
Oh, we just had one, Shannon. Remember the fumigation one, and the lender needed the W-9 and all the information. So that's a good example, and it's been over a year.
It's been over a year, and we just released the money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lisa, or some of my amazing agents on here, do you guys have questions about escrow and title? And by the way, while people are thinking of their questions, I've learned a lot of different things, because it's one of those things where you can do this for as long as I have, or as Lisa have, and there's always something new, right? The market dictates some of the changes or the revisals in rules and standards and so forth. Some of the things that I've learned today, some of my ahas are some lenders or some banks are limiting the wire transfers. That's great, because that's just, again, reinforces the conversation and communication that we need to have in preparation when we're dealing with like a buyer consultation, to make them aware of this kind of stuff. Asking the LO, the lenders, the buyer's lender or loan officer, what the lead time is, how long they're running on appraisals, so that we're always in a rush to get things accepted. But if we have a 30-day escrow and they're running 45 days for an appraisal, you will absolutely lose your deposit. Unless you have a mutual agreement to extend that, that's outside of what that contract that we've agreed upon is. And that does not do the buyers any kind of service. And the last thing that I learned today, which is amazing, is hard money requires potentially additional information. So those are really huge things. And no matter how long you've done this, if those are new things that are that we're dealing with right now, it's always great to stay on top of things. But Lisa, you took yourself off on mute. Do you have any questions or comments, ahas?
I have a question / comment. So I oftentimes hear people say, well, you know, we're going to close escrow because the boyfriend, let's say we have a couple and the husband or boyfriend has bad credit. So we're going to add him on after. So my concern and question has always been is if our buyer closes an escrow and then subsequently they make a deed transfer to add somebody onto escrow, does it invalidate the title policy?
For the homeowner's policy, because
Yeah,
it
and should
protects-
they then be asking for a binder before they close
Mhm.
escrow?
They can't ask for a binder adding that other party. They'll get the homeowner's policy how they close escrow.
They will
But
need
the
to
home-
ask for a specific endorsement
Yes.
that we would be able to provide, but they will have to remain on title. So
Right.
Shannon Cortez, I close escrow, Shannon Cortez, and then I want to add my husband with a quick claim deed post-closing, Shannon Cortez, Christopher Cortez. I'm reaching out to my title officer and asking for an endorsement at that time.
Okay, should it happen before close of escrow or at the time that they make the transfer? And if it's okay, at the time they make the transfer, and will there be a cost to that?
The endorsement for the title policy transfer would be $150. There is a fee for that.
Awesome, thank you.
Anyone else have any questions about title or escrow? No one? Any ahas? We can't reuse mine either. No? All right. Shannon and team, thank you so much for, we need to do this more often. I think it's super helpful. Maybe we should do this like once a quarter with you guys, and hopefully maybe next time we can aim to have it in the training room, and then we can invite some people in person, and also those who can't can Zoom in. But it's been super helpful. We do appreciate you pouring into us and teaching us a lot of things today. And if anyone has any questions, can they reach out to you guys?
Yes, of course.
Awesome. If you don't mind, Sean, I'll stay on a little bit, but can you put your contact information, or Shannon or whomever's in the chat? And if you guys have questions, you can reach out to me. You can reach out to them directly. And thank you for dropping by and spending time with us today, everyone. I hope you have a wonderful day. This is the last meeting of the year. So if I don't see you, have a happy holiday, and call me with any questions. Thanks, everyone.
Awesome.
Happy holidays,
holidays.
everyone. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Sean, are you typing your contact? Awesome.
Yeah, and I can email it out too for those who have already dropped off. I'll make sure that everyone gets a contact. Awesome.
Perfect. Thanks,
Thanks,
Chad.
guys.
We will definitely do it again.
Thank you, guys. Take care now.